We're going to end the symposium with one of our own. Joe became the head archivist at the center, I think approximately 14 months ago, and has quickly had to come to grips with what the center is now, and hopefully what we aspire to become in the future. The center's mission from the beginning was to collect, preserve, and share the history of motorsports. That seemed daunting in 1998, and trust me, it's even more daunting now. One of the big things in terms of how to deal with all of our collections is digitization, and I believe that's going to be the main topic of Joe's talk today, but we want to welcome Joe. Joe is not from a racing background, but to his credit, he has learned very quickly. He's a great guy to work with, and we welcome Joe to the podium.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Am I good? Okay. So I have bad news. I'm going to take the next 2 hours to talk about library and archives. I hope you weren't planning on getting anywhere.
Oh, no. Look at the time. It's all over.
Now, yes, as Kip pointed out, I do not have a racing background, so it's a little intimidating talking to the room full of experts here. But I don't claim to be an expert in the field of motorsports, but I do have a background in libraries and archives, and before that I was a high school social studies teacher, so I come at this from a long interest in history, and I grew up in the Upstate New York area, and I did attend one race at Watkins Glen in 1978. I came here when I was 10 years old. And saw the Formula One race the year Mario Andretti, well, didn't finish that race, but he was the world champion. So that's my my racing background. I'm done now. Okay. So I've been here for just over a year, and as Arthur pointed out from earlier in his presentation for Rebs, I did reach out to him pretty quickly last year to touch base. I saw that he was coming from a university. There were a number of interesting parallels we had, because where he was at, WPI, was my son who is a second year at Drexel now. His second choice was WPI, and it was my first choice, but it was his choice to make. So he's not at WPI, but we had visited the campus twice the previous year. And Arthur also worked with one of my old high school friends, who is the head wrestling coach at WPI, and somebody who I'm not only friends with, but have a lot of family connections with. So Arthur and I have, while we don't have a racing background, we have a lot of connections in other ways. So we're really looking forward to working together. So I wanted to talk quickly a little bit about the topics on this slide. So a little bit about the birth of the International Motor Racing Research Center, the growth of our collections over the last 27 years, what we've done for digitization in the past and what we're planning to do in the future, and just make a blanket note that all the images from this are coming from our own collections here. So I love this picture of Cameron and Gene Argetsinger. As many of you, most of you have probably seen this picture before, but if you haven't, it's a classic Argetsinger photo. 1998. I think pretty obvious, was the 50-year anniversary of the first race at Watkins Glen, brought here by Cameron and others, but Cameron really was the key mover and shaker here. And I think it's appropriate to give Jean credit for the birth of the IMRRC, because she really had a huge role in working in libraries, being on the public library board. And so it really was a team effort. And they worked with other longtime friends and leaders in the field. John and Peg Bishop had a huge role. I mean, the center is dedicated to John Bishop, so that's a really important figure to discuss. And, I like to think about these couples, these relationships. It wasn't just like the Cameron or John. They had partners in this, and they were critical, I think, in getting us to where we are and getting the center off the ground to begin with. And I also wanted to give a shout out to John Saunders, who's been here. I love the pictures of John. Is John still here? Oh, he's not. Okay. All right. Well, I love seeing the old pictures of John with the beard. Those are great. So John also has been around for a long time and played a key role in helping the center get off the ground. So, and these are just a few people. There's a lot of people who are involved in this, and these are just some of the key folks. So once people got word that the research center was opening, donations started flowing in. So we actually were getting donations as early as 1997, and they were really coming in heavy in the first few years. And when you just open up and you don't have a lot on your shelves, you're taking in anything and everything. So we've got all kinds of stuff that we've had for a long time, and we have continued to take in a lot of stuff. And we are sort of, as our staff knows, we're bursting at the seams. So we're looking to expand in the future. But we have, in terms of types of materials, some of the major things that we have are books, periodicals, race programs, but also things that are, I think, even more interesting or more unique is the photographic materials, the prints, slides, negatives, transparencies, and some of the scrapbooks, which I'll talk about later. We have some really cool scrapbooks in various collections. And then the films. We have a lot of reel-to-reel films, VHS, and various other magnetic type materials. So a lot of the stuff, what I think is interesting about our collections is that we have a lot of film footage and photographic materials in general, that was shot by not professional photographers, but by amateurs. And you really get a glimpse at what this kind of, I think many people have talked about the changes and what things look like today. If you look at a Grand Prix event today, it's like going to the Super Bowl, it's like going to the Olympics, it's like going to the World Cup, right? Most people can't afford it. It's incredibly expensive. And you see the photos, behind the scenes, a lot at Watkins Glen, but like we have images from all over the place. It was just a different world, and it's a world that doesn't exist anymore. And so making that stuff available, preserving that for future generations. I mean, it's already, when I look at it, I'm thinking like, wow, that's so different from today. And I can only imagine what future generations will be thinking when they see that. The world is changing, and this stuff needs to be preserved so that we have a sense of like what did life look like? For me, some of the most interesting aspects of this world are the kind of social and cultural environments that we see, like how motorsports affects people's lives and how they interacted with it, how they appreciated doing this for fun. It was a fun event, right? That's what it's all about. That's what it's supposed to be about, right? Anyway, it's fun. It's not about making money, right? But it is about making money too. But people like to participate in this because they enjoy it, right? And so our collections help tell the stories that that will be lost to history if they're not preserved. So that's really what we're all about. That's our focus. And some of the things as an archivist that I really like are the things that I will call manuscript collections or institutional records or organizational records. And those, I'll talk a little bit about I'll give some examples later, but just to give you a sense of what we archivists mean when they say manuscript collections or archival collections, or if something's, I'll use the word archivy. Those are the collections that have a variety of materials in them. They might have correspondence, photographs, film, records, design drawings, right? Some of our collections have all of these things in them. And those are what are really interesting because they provide you historical context. They can provide you something that, I'll talk about John Fitch in a little bit. His collection, his papers, I would say, right, include design drawings for safety features and things like that, photographs, all kinds of documentation. Those things you can get a sense of like what somebody, what their life was about, how they contributed, how they interacted with other people in the field, and it provides you historical context. In organizational records, I'll talk a little bit about some of the key ones we have in a second here, but yeah, I'll get to that in a minute. Just some numbers. We're approaching 7,000 books, 10,000 periodicals, 5,000 race programs, 250,000 photographs. I think we have a lot more than that, and this is photographic material, so I'm including slides and negatives. We probably have a lot more than that. Sometimes it's hard to add everything up because we just have so many varied collections in different formats, but there's a lot. Films and video, well over 3,000. And a lot of these are things that go back, I would say the bulk of our collections are sort of mid-20th century on. We have some things, obviously, before 1950, especially late 40s, but most of the stuff is in that sort of period, mid to late 20th century. And again, like amateur films and that by people like Andy Gerard and the Bill and Virginia Close, folks like that. And so our total collection size is like 6,000 linear feet. And when, linear feet just means like how much space it takes up on a shelf. So think of like 6,000 bankers boxes, essentially. That's what we're talking about. So these are the institutional records or organizational records that we have that I think stand out. The IMSA records, that includes some really cool scrapbooks, and from throughout the 70s. The National Speed Sport News records, and when archivists talk about things like, use terms like collections, papers, records, they actually have significance. And so when we say we have somebody's papers, it means we have like this person's, their kind of life work. You don't just have like a few things. That's more of a collection, right? Records implies it's an institution, right? Like, so you have, we have the IMSA records. I mean, we have like what is available. We have those organizational records. National Speed Sport News, we have their files. So like we don't just have like a full run of National Speed Sport News from the 30s to 2011. We have the stuff that didn't get used, and that composes a lot. That 150 linear feet is not counting the actual publication. That's the files that they had there, right? So this is the stuff that didn't get published, and if you want to see it, you'd have to come see us right now, right? Hopefully we can. That's a future digitization project right there, and that has been discussed in the past, and hopefully we'll get to that in the not too distant future. We can't talk about institutional records without bringing up the SCCA records, the Sports Car Club of America records. Well, we don't technically own. We are basically the custodian of those records, and that whole collection, that is like an archive in itself, and that is something that we manage and process and work with the SCCA on maintaining, and we get lots of questions from researchers about what's in those records. And that's a massive one. And then, well, a much smaller amount of records, the Watkins Glen Grand Prix Corporation records. Now, some of those, some of the people here know were burned up in a fire. So we don't have everything, but what exists, we're the place that has them. Now, Mr. Green has viewed these records, and they're in pretty rough shape because they were in the basement or in a barn, I think, for a couple of decades, and so I think they need some conservation efforts before I would want people to be able to work with them, but they are quite valuable, and if you want to see the litigation and the lawsuits from the Summer Jam Fest, there's some pretty big folders with that in it. Yeah. So let's make a statement about our digitization. The center holds a number of truly unique and historically significant collections in the form of film, photography, scrapbooks, and many of which were created by donors with unusually intimate relationships with racing circuits or race series. The housing and maintenance of many of these fragile and often deteriorating items is challenging and limits their regular usage. The ability to create digital images of this material would vastly increase their use by motor racing scholars and enthusiasts. This was written by Duke. Do you recognize that? Scrapbooks in particular, I think, are items that archivists have a love-hate relationship with because they're often very fragile and have a lot of preservation issues. But they're, again, thinking about the context of things. If you just take all the photos out or something, it kind of loses that context of where they came from. So there's various ways to deal with that and try to replicate, scanning a whole page as opposed to taking the photos out. But keeping it intact if you can is probably the best bet because you can see what the person was thinking, what they were, how they were putting it together, what was their MO. So a couple of things. We do have some of our collections, very limited amount, digitized in a couple of places. We have some photos on our website, so there's always that. You can find some of our stuff on our website, but in a larger extent, if you have ever gone to the New York Heritage Collections, there's a website that has stuff from all over New York State. It's a really great site, and we are a member through our South Central Regional Library conference or council organization. We are able to access, to contribute, and they host images. So we have 3 different collections, and there are a few films from Andy Gerard on that, and there are some Kathy Meredith photos, and there are more on U.S. Grand Prix in it that we've put up. So that's a very limited example of what we have the potential to do. And in the future, we are going to be working with vendors who focus on digitizing film, digitizing photographs. We've already started working with one one company. Let me go ahead here. I don't know how many of you are familiar with digitization vendors. George Blood is in the Philadelphia area. It is one of the premier film, moving image, audio and video, archival quality digitization vendors. I mean, they work with all kinds of museums, large organizations like NPR, colleges and universities. They're kind of like the top. There's probably a couple of other places like this in the United States. Like, it's one of the top places in the country. So we are working with them. They've already digitized some of our stuff, but we'll start sending stuff to them more heavily next year, using a $100,000 donation that we received last year for digitization. So we are working on that. We will start working with Backstage Library Works. It's in Bethlehem, PA, also an organization that just does digitization. So one of the challenges with doing in-house digitization is that you need staff and space. Those are two things that right now we're a little challenged with. So we're looking at working with a vendor who can, like, that's what they do. They have the standards. Arthur mentioned like FADG4. These are things that these vendors know and do. Like, that's what they're doing. So it's economy of scale. You send it out to them, they get it done. So that's what we're looking at in 2026. So we also will be hosting our own version of OCLC's Content DM, which is the platform that's used by the New York Heritage site. So it'll be a similar look and feel, but we'll have our own version. One of the challenges with the New York Heritage site, if you're thinking, well, why don't you just use that, is you can only put stuff technically from New York State in it. It's a New York State funded organization. So yeah, we could put Watkins Glen stuff in it, but if we wanted to get outside of New York State, they wouldn't be too happy about that. So I am planning on being quick, by the way. I don't think we'll be here till 4:30. So don't get nervous. Hang with me. And there's pictures coming up. So I just put together a few examples of some of the collections that I think are pretty cool and would be fun to show off. That could have picked completely different ones, honestly. There's so many to choose from. But before I get into that, I just want to make a note on digitization as we hear a lot about digitizing things. And please don't ever ask me, why don't you just digitize everything? That's probably the question I would be most likely to just not talk to you if you said that to me. Here are the reasons. Not everything can and should be digitized. There are many reasons for this, right? Costs, it's expensive. Limited historical significance. History is always like, in no era do we have everything that happened, right? And even in the late post-World War II era, the idea, the volume of materials that were being created, the paperwork, right? And now in the digital world, I mean, it's just gotten, every year it's more and more and more and more. You can't keep everything. And even if you did, like, what historian or who could ever look through it all, right? I mean, even with searches and even with AI searches, you're just going down a rabbit hole with that. If something's available elsewhere, it's not unique. One of the things I think Arthur mentioned was having less duplication, or we've talked about that anyway, so that every place doesn't have to have everything, right? Like if you have it as more of a consortium where researchers can go to, they know they can go to the consortium and find what they're looking for, right? It doesn't, not every place has to have it. Or not every place has to have it digitized, or maybe you access it through that digital consortium in one place, and that one place has it. And there's always copyright issues, and I've found this to be more challenging in this field because there are a lot of professional photographers at all kinds of levels. You know, I mean, it doesn't have to be the super famous person. Anybody who is taking pictures and getting paid for them, you know, is going to have copyright. So there's questions about that. Yeah, and then the high cost of digital preservation. Once you have things digitized, your work's not done. You know, even after you get all the metadata and all that, now you've got to store it, and that costs money. Like the high resolution stuff, especially, right? The low res stuff, not so bad. The high res, that's a lot of data. It's a lot of data. So you've got to, you know, you have to think about what makes sense. Okay, here we go. Let's get into some. This is honestly one of my favorite collections, the Bill and Virginia Close collection. Again, I mentioned the husband and wife teams that have been involved in racing. I find fascinating. You know, whether it's a husband and wife rally racing team, which there's a ton of throughout, going way back, you know, to the mid 20th century, to folks that were doing timing and scoring. So this is, as far as scrapbooks go, I've got to say these scrapbooks are amazing. Like, for a lot of times individuals are putting scrapbooks together and they make sense to those folks, but if somebody else is looking at them, you know, there's a lot of questions like, well, where is that? What year is it? Things like that. They had great details, great pictures, where it was, who's in the picture, things like that. So it takes a lot of the legwork out of figuring out where you are here. So let me just read this little blurb on the Close collection. Bill and his wife, Virginia, donated their large, well-organized collections of film, photography, and scrapbooks, as well as voluminous collections of book and racing periodicals, to the center after their deaths. Bill was chief timer and scorer at Watkins Glen during the United States Grand Prix era for many years, and an SCCA regional official. In his earlier days, Bill, who was an Englishman who emigrated first to Canada and then to the Buffalo region, was an avid fan of Canadian motorsports and an engineer by trade at the Cornell Aeronautical Laboratories. So was Bill Milliken, right? So these guys worked together. And in fact, one of the things, I didn't write this down, but I'm pretty sure if I recall, was that Virginia, Ginny Close, actually was doing timing and scoring before her husband, because she worked for Bill Milliken and was doing that, and she got Bill into it. And so I just think that's kind of cool. Am I right on that, Bill? I hear chatter back there. All right, I'll get a okay. So all right, so Ginny also worked as an expert timer and scorer. The Closes performed official timing and scoring duties for other American race circuits, including Nelson Ledges. Although they were not professional photographers, the collections of film and photography were very high quality and meticulously organized, annotated, and there's quite a bit of it. So, I'll give you some other examples of where they were, and roughly what we have. Like around 2,400 images of Watkins Glen racing during the 60s through the 80s, including sports car, Formula Libre, Formula One Championship, Can-Am, Trans Am, USRRC, SCCA, regional and national, and vintage. There's another over 400 images from Canadian Grand Prix and its support races, regional, national SCCA sports car races, at locations such as Dunkirk and Nelson Ledges, and events at European tracks. Closes were in a unique position to intimately access cars, drivers, and racing personalities. These standard-sized color slides are inventoried in detail and are unique and useful. And we're working on, some have been digitized, and we're working on, that's going to be one of the collections we focus on. I really want to do the scrapbooks next year. And the scrapbooks run like through the, let's see, I have something on that. The 22 annual scrapbooks created between 1948 and 1965. So those are some pretty interesting years. And they were at a lot of places. I mean, there's a lot of Watkins Glen, but there's a lot of other places in there too. Let me just go through. So first, these two are both Watkins Glen. Oh, do you want me to go back? Is that a Collier? Salmon Miles. See, there you go. I didn't even know that. Look at it, just like a lucky. All right. Grand Island Grand Prix. I'd never even heard of this until I saw this picture. These are the kinds of pictures, and you just, they're very, to me, it's very nostalgic looking at that. Like all these folks here, just it looks like a big party. It's fun. Oh, and here's Bill Milliken. So I didn't get a chance to identify the folks in it, but I'm sure some people here can identify who's there. But Bill Milliken's FWD there at Edenvale Airstrip. Sterling Moss, Charlie Lytle, and the Ford Mustang, 1962 Grand Prix, Watkins Glen. And another person who I find fascinating, Tex Hopkins. We have his lavender suit in our collection. Such a character. Lots of footage of him, on film and photographs in our collections. This is at the 68 U.S. Grand Prix. How many people here had met or saw Tex Hopkins in their lifetimes? Oh, okay.
And you have his suit too.
Yes, we have his suit. It's one of my favorite textiles, I guess I would say. Yeah, pretty neat. All right, another gentleman we have, and a bunch of. If you go to our website, and I would encourage you to take a look at the Irv Dolan photos on the website. There's a bunch of really good ones. This guy, I haven't been able to find out a ton of information on him. He was from New York State. I think he went to RIT because I found something online when I'm Googling him. And looked like he did go to RIT and for photography. So his photos are good. I mean, like you can tell, like he was like a professional. But if anybody has knowledge of this person, his background, and that, it would be great to hear more. We have a little bit of information, but not a lot. Most of his photos are from that we have are from the 1950s and 60s, and various tracks, Bridgehampton, Sebring, Watkins Glen. But this one's Erwin Goldschmidt in 1951 at Bridgehampton. Fred Wacker, 1952 at Bridgehampton. I think all the Irv Dolan ones I'm showing you are on our website. You can see them, and they are, I think, identified as such. Sebring, and the Ferraris. Car 17 was co-driven by Juan Manuel Fangio and Eugenio Castellati. Was I saying that right? Won the race. Car 18 came in second. I think our website has more details on it. Like car 18 came in second, 19 did not finish. And I think the drivers are identified on the website. I realized after I had put this together, I'm like, oh, should have put that on there. This is a fun picture. Giovanni and Roy Salvadori, just kind of hanging out, playing some cards, chilling. There's some really good kind of scenes like this where, you know, I don't know if you're going to see, you know, F1 drivers today playing cards like that, you know, just hanging out where people are taking pictures of them. There's a few pictures like this of the cars coming into Watkins Glen for the races, and you know, I can only imagine the traffic. I mean, you can get a pretty good sense of what it was like trying to get in for the Grand Prix. This was the first year, and I think it gives a good indication of the excitement and the energy that existed at that time. Okay, I wanted to talk a little bit about John Fitch, and I'm going to read a piece that was published well, the title of the article is John Fitch's Archives Donated to International Motor Racing Research Center. This was in late 2016. It was November 10th. It was almost 9 years ago exactly. So I'm going to read you this. John Fitch admired and respected John Fitch. He was a racer, a patriot, a fighter pilot, track designer, a historian of all things automotive, and an inventor with traffic safety at the forefront of his research. He amassed a myriad collection of trophies, books, photos, and a lot more in his travels. And thanks to his sons, John, Christopher, and Stephen Fitch, that trove has been donated to the IMRRC in Watkins Glen, greatly expanding its existing John Cooper Fitch collection. The collection reflects John Fitch's remarkable and varied life as a talented international race car driver, an innovative inventor of road and driver safety equipment, a designer of racing and production cars, and an author who shared his exceptional story through his books. That is a quote from my predecessor, Jenny Ambrose, the previous archivist here. We're honored to serve as the largest historical repository of materials related to John Fitch. The family's donation was facilitated by a longtime Fitch friend and historian Larry Berman, a native of the Boston area, who said, "To carry this forward, the IMRRC has developed a world-class reputation, which motivated me to obtain the Fitch archives donated by his family." Fitch had died in 2012 at the age of 95. A large part of the donation consists of trophies and cups that he earned by winning more than 20 major races during his 18 years as an active driver. In addition to being the first national champion of the Sports Car Club of America in 1951, Fitch was also won Sebring outright in '53, won his class at the 55 Mille Miglia, and captured Golden Jubilee Tourist Trophy win at the dangerous Dundred circuit in Northern Ireland that same year. Also in 1955, he was a member of the Mercedes-Benz Works team at Le Mans, which ended in tragedy, as we heard earlier today, when his co-driver plunged his exploding car into the crowd, killing more than 80. So John Fitch he saw some things, right? I mean, beyond the trophies, the Fitch collection also includes numerous photographs, clippings, race programs, and other documentation of his career. The papers include his correspondence on the cars he built, including the Corvair Sprint and the Fitch Phoenix, and his efforts to develop an early impact absorption system for racetracks, among other creations. So that's what I mean when I talk about like having some context. Like here we have this whole collection of John Fitch materials that he created, and sometimes there's other things mixed in, but the stuff it's his papers, it's his life. And we see Fitch at Elkhart Lake. And at that Tourist Trophy winning event in 1955 with Sterling Moss. John Bornholt, who's I'm guessing a number of you know, who just passed away this past summer in August. I like these two. I think these two photos again capture the sort of behind the scenes. You know, this type of racing that doesn't always make the front headlines, but was like certainly some of the stuff you come across in National Speed Sport News, and it's I think it really offers a lens on American society and culture in the 1950s. I'll read you a little bit about the John Bornholt collection. A lot of the stuff that we do have from John was the sports car racing related, but obviously not all of it. He was an SCCA steward since the 1950s when he oversaw the Giants Despair Hill Climb, which was then part of the National Championship Series, considered one of the standards by which stewards are measured. Over many years, he was chief steward for most of the major SCCA professional series and the United States Grand Prix, as well as countless club races. Among the numerous boxes of material that John donated over the years are over 1,400 slides shot from between 1956 and 1979 at several U.S. racetracks, including Bridgehampton, Sebring, Vineland, and Watkins Glen. To the Andy Gerard. We have a lot of really cool stuff from Andy Gerard. He was a friend of motor racing worthies Cameron Argesinger and Charles Lytle. And that's who he's in the picture. Well, we see him in the picture with Jim Martindale and Cameron Argesinger. And that one at Indy. And does anybody know Jim Martindale? Besides you, Bill, we talked about him, but.
Jim Martindale was Martindale and Hubble, the legal directory, the 100-year-old company that published ratings on lawyers.
Ah, okay, okay.
So I gave my father an A+.
Very good. So Andy Gerard, talented amateur photographer and racing enthusiast, produced a lifetime's compendium of high-quality original racing film from Indianapolis, Watkins Glen, and other circuits from the mid-1950s to the early 1970s. He attended the Indianapolis 500 and the U.S. Grand Prix for many years, and the vibrancy of his work indicates that he had close-up access to the scenes of primary action in the events. While the IMRRC has had the opportunity to digitize the Watkins Glen films, due from like grants through New York State, through the South Central Regional Library Council, and some of which has been put on that New York New York digital platform. There's a lot more we have yet to do with him. Yeah, including stuff from Indianapolis. So. Again, some of his stuff is pretty classic. I mean, it's professional level, despite him technically not being a professional, I guess. jump ahead. So we have Colin Chapman and Jim Clark. 1964 here at Watkins Glen. All right. I'm going to switch gears a little bit and talk about Joe Bragg, who worked for Chris Economaki at the National Speed Sport News and covered a lot of the tracks in the PA area: Langhorne, Reading Fairgrounds, Williams Grove, and Trenton, New Jersey. But we have a pretty robust collection of his work. He was a staff photographer from the 1950s to about 1990 for National Speed Sport News. During this time, he covered many types of racing, including Indy cars, sprint cars, midgets, stock cars, modified racers, and motorcycles. Covered tracks in Langhorne, Trenton, Indianapolis, Pocono, Williams Grove, Reading, and Municipal Stadium in Philadelphia. Joe Bragg's rare pictorial documentation of this unique period in auto racing history is the only collection of this scope and quantity known to exist. Racing historian Joe Blindberry Jr. characterizes this collection as a, quote, collector's treasure and of museum quality. The Bragg family donated this collection to us in 2023. The quality and artistic integrity of the images captured by Mr. Bragg are unimpeachable, and the scope of the collection captures an important era in racing history. These are some of his areas with Chris Economaki, and note from Chris Economaki and some of his press badges and that from throughout his career. I think the first one is from 1960 and the last one's from like 1990 or something. Kathy Meredith, kind of a local, I guess you could say. She was living in Canandaigua, although she was born and raised in Indianapolis area. She actually was a writer, photographer, and editor for the Daily Messenger in Canandaigua for about 40 years, from the late 60s to the 1990s. Her stuff is amazing. I mean, it's really, really cool. And I got some help identifying, I did know who Mary Andretti was, but the other two guys I didn't. And Bill helped me figure them out. And that picture is from 1970, and I think Ignazio Ginti died like the following year, or 72, I forget. Again, yeah, a lot of tragedy in that time period. This may be my all-time favorite photo that I've seen so far, right here. I mean, cool, huh?
Who is that, Joe?
That's Sir Jackie Stewart, who I think was on hand to dedicate our center when we opened, correct?
That is correct.
I was not there. This is kind of a cool. This reminds me a little bit of the photo we had on the cover of our calendar last year. That was a Bernard Caillet photo, I think, at Le Mans. Does that sound right? 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 Like, it reminds me of that with like the photo of the people looking at something else while she's getting them, you know. Okay, and then let's see. Switch into Indy. There's a few Indy pictures here. As I said, Kathy Meredith grew up in Indianapolis, so most of her photos are either from Watkins Glen. She was based in Canandaigua, just up the road, really, in Indianapolis, where she had I think a pretty strong connection to. I had to include one of Janet Guthrie. I had to look at that a couple times to figure out, okay, something's up with this picture. Who is that woman? Okay, it's Janet Guthrie. Got it. Okay. So I gave myself a little tutorial on that. Because I also wanted to include, so she was the first woman to qualify for the Indy 500, 1977. And the next picture, I'd already picked this one out to put in there, and I was like, because that just looked fun, right? Team Foyt, after A.J. Foyt won in 1977. Fun times. The last collection I have here is a collection from Randy Barnett, who was a motorsports editor at Stars and Stripes, based in Europe, from the late 60s to around 1990. And he was a close friend of Michael Argetsinger, who this symposium is dedicated to. And I believe this collection was hauled here by Rob Argetsinger in a tractor trailer or something like that. I was reading the newsletter. So there were Argetsingers really heavily involved in this collection. There's some great photos in this one, and it's all international. So I thought this was a fun picture here. Monte Carlo, 1969. Emerson Fittipaldi, 1974, in the Spanish Grand Prix. Bruce McLaren, 1968, in the Belgian Grand Prix. Which he won. This is my last, that's it. This is my last one, 1968, Le Mans. Had to get a Le Mans picture in there. So I'm happy to answer any questions, but I understand if people just want to go.
Well, we're taking a break till the next hour of your talk. But,
It's intermission. Yeah, it's intermission.
just, Joe, thank you very much. That was really great. Does anybody have any questions? Thank you, Joe. Job well done.